Every living thing dies, all of them. No exceptions across 3.8 billion years of life on Earth. Bacteria, trees, whales, humans, every organism that has ever existed has had a lifespan with an ending. But here's what should trouble you. Why is death universal if life wants to survive? Why don't we see immortal bacteria that just keep dividing forever, copying themselves endlessly? Why did multicellular organisms actually evolve programmed death, apoptosis, senescence, built-in expiration dates? If evolution favors survival and reproduction, why does it favor dying? The standard answer is that death makes room for the young. That sounds wise. But it's just describing what happens, not explaining why it had to happen that way. It's a platitude, not a mechanism. The real answer inverts everything you think about life and death. Death isn't life's failure, it's life's invention. Without death, you don't get complexity, sex, adaptation, consciousness, or even stable species. The reason has nothing to do with making room. It's about what variation actually requires. Start with what should be true. If natural selection favors organisms that survive and reproduce, then immortality should win. A bacterium that divides every 20 minutes. Copy the DNA, split down the middle, done. Why doesn't it just keep going forever? No aging, no wearing out, just endless copies propagating through time. That's what you'd expect. But they don't do that. DNA copying makes errors. The mutation rate is roughly 1 mistake per 10 billion base pairs copied. That sounds incredibly accurate, and it is. But over thousands of generations, those errors accumulate. This is called Muller's ratchet. Once an error enters a lineage that reproduces asexually, it can't be easily removed. It just stays there, and more errors pile on top. The immortal lineage becomes corrupted, less fit, eventually dies out. Death isn't optional. It's written into the chemistry of replication itself. So even bacteria die, in a sense, by being replaced by their own descendants who carry slightly different versions of their genes. But that's just molecular accidents. The real puzzle comes when you look at complex life. Single-celled organisms can theoretically repair damage indefinitely. Some do. Certain bacteria show no signs of aging if you keep them in ideal conditions. But multicellular organisms evolved something shocking: programmed death. Your cells have expiration dates built in. Your cells have telomeres, repetitive DNA sequences at the ends of chromosomes that act like countdown timers. Every time a cell divides, the telomeres get shorter. After about 50 divisions, they're too short, and the cell stops dividing. This is called the Hayflick limit. Your body also actively kills cells through apoptosis, controlled cell death. About 60 billion cells per day in an adult human are deliberately destroyed by your own body. This seems insane. Why build in obsolescence? The common answer is that it prevents cancer. Cells that refuse to die and keep dividing uncontrollably. But that's backward. Cancer is the problem that arose. Because we're mortal, not the reason we're mortal. Immortal cells become cancerous precisely because mortality is the normal state. The real reason is population turnover. Here's a concrete example. Imagine a species that lives 1,000 years versus one that lives 1 year. The environment changes, an ice age arrives, a new predator appears, a disease emerges. The long-lived species takes 1,000 years for a new generation to fully replace the old one. The short-lived species? 1,000 new generations in that same time. Each generation is a trial run of new genetic combinations. Some work better in the new environment, some worse. Death is the refresh rate of evolution. Without turnover, populations can't adapt fast enough. But wait, that only works if something else is true. Sexual reproduction makes no sense. Asexual reproduction, cloning, is far more efficient. You pass on 100% of your genes instead of just 50%. You don't need to find a mate. You can reproduce faster. Yet almost all complex life uses sex. Why the waste? The answer is variation. Sex creates it through recombination, shuffling the genes from two parents to create unique offspring with different trait combinations. But here's the key insight. Variation only matters if selection pressure exists. Selection pressure requires limited resources, competition, and differential survival, which requires some individuals dying. Think about it. Without death, there's no selection. Every genetic variant persists forever. Variation becomes meaningless noise. Without variation, there's no adaptation. And without adaptation, you get extinction, death of the entire lineage. Sex and death are coupled inventions. They evolved together, not separately. Sex generates the variation. Death provides the selection that makes variation useful. Remove either one and the system collapses. Let me show you how extreme this optimization gets. Pacific salmon are born in rivers, swim out to the ocean, grow for several years, then return to their birthplace to spawn. And then they die. Immediately. Not killed by predators. They actively shut down. Their bodies flood with cortisol, their organs fail, their flesh deteriorates. This is programmed. They could theoretically survive, but they don't. Why? Because their death feeds the next generation. Decomposing salmon bodies release nutrients into nutrient-poor mountain streams. Those nutrients feed the algae, which feed the insects, which feed the juvenile salmon. The parent salmon literally become the food web that raises their offspring. We can measure this. Salmon-derived nitrogen shows up in trees 100 meters from the stream. The forest itself is partially built from dead salmon. This gets stranger. There are two reproductive strategies in nature. Semilparous species breed once and die, like salmon. Iteroparous species breed multiple times across their lives, like humans. In unstable environments where conditions change unpredictably, semilparity wins. Why? Because putting all your resources into one massive reproductive event, then dying, is more reliable than trying to survive to breed again when the future is uncertain. Death isn't just tolerated, it's strategically optimized for different ecological contexts. And this pattern shows up everywhere once you see it. Look at the range of lifespans across life. Mayflies live 24 hours. Some species live only 5 minutes as adults. Fruit flies live 40 to 50 days. Mice live 2 to 3 years. Humans live about 80 years. Galapagos tortoises live over 150 years. Bristlecone pine trees live 5,000 years. Glass sponges can live 10,000 years. Why such a dramatic range? What determines lifespan? Not size. Elephants live 70 years, bowhead whales over 200 years, but small bats can live 40 years. Not metabolism. Hummingbirds have insanely high metabolic rates, but live 5 or more years, while similar-sized mice live 2 years. The pattern that emerges is predation pressure and environmental stability. High predation favors short lifespans. Reproduce fast before you're eaten. Low predation allows long lifespans. You can invest in maintenance and reproduce later. Here's a concrete case. Opossums on the mainland face high predation. Island opossums, isolated from predators, evolved longer lifespans in just thousands of years. Their cells actually age slower. Telomeres shorten less rapidly. Lifespan itself evolves. It's not fixed. Natural selection adjusts the death clock based on ecological math. This is called disposable soma theory, developed by Thomas Kirkwood. Your body is a temporary vehicle for genes. You invest in repair and maintenance only as much as your reproductive strategy requires. If you'll likely die at age 2 from predators, why build a body that could last 20 years? Better strategy: mature fast, breed early, accept death. Which brings us to perhaps the darkest implication. Human females experience menopause around age 50. Fertility ends decades before death. This is bizarre in mammals. Orcas and pilot whales also have menopause. Almost nothing else does. Why stop reproducing while still alive? The naive answer is that the body wears out. But that's backward. If reproduction is evolutionarily paramount, selection should maintain fertility as long as possible. The real answer is the grandmother hypothesis. In pre-modern hunter-gatherer societies, children with living grandmothers had significantly better survival rates. Grandmothers provide food, childcare, and knowledge transfer. The math works out. Having 2 surviving grandchildren by helping your daughter is genetically more successful than having 1 more child of your own, who might die without proper support. Evolution programmed the end of fertility because it increased genetic success. Your body's reproductive shutdown is adaptive death of one function to boost another. Even stranger, human longevity increased. After menopause evolved. We're living extra years beyond reproduction, and those years are evolutionarily useful, not vestigial. This inverts the basic assumption. Death, or cessation of biological function, can be actively selected for if it helps gene propagation. Death doesn't just shape individuals, it structures entire ecosystems. Remove wolves from Yellowstone in 1926, and elk populations explode. Elk overgraze the vegetation. River ecosystems collapse because there's no plant matter to stabilize the banks. Reintroduce wolves in 1995, and elk start dying again. Vegetation recovers. Beavers return because there are trees to build dams with. Rivers stabilize. The death of elk literally restructures the landscape. This is called a trophic cascade. Predation death creates habitat diversity. Without it, ecosystems simplify and collapse. Another example, sea otters eat sea urchins. When otters are present, urchins don't overgraze kelp. Kelp forests thrive, supporting hundreds of species. Remove the otters, like happened along the Pacific coast when they were hunted. Urchins explode in population, kelp disappears, and you get urchin barrens, dead zones. The death of urchins via otters creates life for everything else. There's a broader pattern here. Nutrient cycling requires death. Decomposition releases nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon back into soil and water. Those nutrients grow plants, which feed herbivores, which feed predators, and the cycle continues. Without death, nutrients get locked into living bodies. The ecosystem starves and collapses. We can measure this. Ecosystems with high natural mortality, high turnover, have higher productivity. More life, not less. There's a historical example that shows this dramatically. Passenger pigeons once numbered in the billions across North America. When they died, whether from predation, disease, or old age, their bodies fertilized the forests. This led to massive mast years, where oak and hickory trees produced enormous quantities of acorns and nuts. When we hunted passenger pigeons to extinction in the early 1900s, forest composition changed. The trees responded to the absence of that fertilization. Death isn't waste, it's nutrient redistribution. Life is a flow system, not a storage system. And this brings us back to the beginning, but deeper. Why is death universal? Not because organisms wear out, some don't. Certain jellyfish can revert to earlier life stages and potentially live indefinitely. Hydra show no signs of aging. Some plants can live for thousands of years. Aging and death aren't inevitable features of being alive. Death is universal because evolution requires differential survival. That phrase sounds clinical, but it means some must die so others can be tested. Imagine a world where nothing dies. Every genetic variant persists forever. The population grows exponentially until resources collapse. There's no way to test which variants work better in the current environment. No selection pressure. No adaptation. And then the first major environmental shift causes mass extinction. Death is the experimental protocol of evolution. Each death is a data point. This variant didn't work well enough. Here, now. Each survival is a data point. This variant worked well enough. Here, now. Accumulate millions of these data points, deaths and survivals, and patterns emerge. Populations shift toward variants that work better. This is why complex life is possible. Complexity requires trial and error across generations. Error means death. You can see this in artificial selection. When humans breed animals or plants, we make progress by culling, killing, or preventing reproduction of individuals that don't have the traits we want. The faster we remove failures, the faster we get results. Nature does the same thing, just without intention, which means something uncomfortable about you specifically. Your lifespan isn't an accident or a tragedy. It's calibrated. Human 80-year lifespans represent the evolutionarily optimal replacement rate for our ecological niche, long enough to learn complex skills, raise multiple offspring, and support grandchildren. Short enough that populations can adapt to environmental changes within centuries, not millennia. If humans lived 500 years, you'd see cultural stagnation, the same generation's ideas dominating for centuries. Slower genetic adaptation, new immune system variants would take longer to spread through the population. Resource competition, the old generation never cedes territory or resources to the young. If humans lived 20 years, there wouldn't be enough time to raise dependent offspring. Human children need about 15 years of care. There wouldn't be enough time to accumulate complex knowledge. Culture would collapse. 80 years is a Goldilocks solution for a species with our particular requirements. And this is why aging exists. It's the enforced turnover rate. Telomeres, cellular senescence, accumulating damage. These aren't bugs in the system. They're features. They ensure you die on schedule so the next generation can iterate on the solution that is humanity, which changes what death actually means. The standard view is that life creates and death destroys. But inverted. Death creates and life maintains. Every complex structure you see, eyes, brains, wings, photosynthesis, exists because of death, not despite it. Death isn't life's enemy. Death is life's generator function. Think about it concretely. Your consciousness exists because your ancestors died. If your 10,000th generation back grandmother had been immortal, you wouldn't exist. She would still be here, unmutated, unchanged. There would have been no variation, no selection, no evolution, no humans. Everything alive today is the descendant of endless death, billions of years of it. Every species is a temporary solution that will eventually be replaced. Every individual is a test case that will be discarded. This sounds grim, but it's actually generative. Death is the recycling process that turns what worked before into raw materials for what might work next. Without death, you get one frozen solution forever. With death, you get infinite exploration of possibility space. The universe doesn't preserve. It iterates. An iteration requires deletion. So when you ask why death exists, you're asking the question backward. You started by asking why death is universal if life wants to survive, but that's the wrong frame. Death is how life survives. Individual death enables population survival through adaptation. Population death enables ecosystem survival through nutrient cycling and trophic balance. Species death enables evolutionary exploration through opening ecological niches. Death isn't the failure of life. Death is the engine that generates more life. Think about the fossil record. It's 99% death. 99% of all species that ever existed are extinct. But that 99% created the 1% that's alive today. Every extinction event opened ecological space for new forms. Every individual death tested a genetic hypothesis. The Cambrian explosion, when complex life suddenly diversified 540 million years ago, that was possible because massive death cleared the board repeatedly, allowing new body plans to be tested. Your existence depends on the death of trilobites, dinosaurs, saber-toothed cats, and 1,000 other lineages that seemed permanent but weren't. Now you might wonder, is there any level where death stops? Where something persists forever? DNA? No, it mutates. Species? No, they go extinct. Ecosystems? No, they collapse and reform. Maybe life itself, the phenomenon, not any particular instance of it, is the only immortal thing. That's a different kind of question. I've got to stop somewhere. But consider this. Death made you possible, and your death will make something else possible. There are endless forms most beautiful, but only because the old forms end.